Well, you brought up immigration, which is something I've really been dying to ask you about, Crystal, because I really have loved your conversations on breaking points between you and Sagar. I think that a lot of people, frankly, have enjoyed the opportunity to hear two reasonable, mature adults have these sort of conversations, as intense as they get. But still, stay substantive and actually talk about the, negatives and benefits and all that kind of stuff to this situation. I do think the left is in a pickle, when it comes to immigration. And I think that it's increasingly hard for me to figure out how we're going to dig our way out of this,
Yeah,
because it's not only something that is an issue in this country, around the world, and specifically, I think in Europe, there's increasingly anti-immigrant sort of sentiment that's really widespread and that's taken over. And obviously, sort of the elephant in the room is that with war and with climate change, it's not going to stop. Like, there are
that's right.
people that are refugees from these situations. They need somewhere to be that is safe. They need somewhere to flee. And unfortunately, there has to be somewhere these people have to go, right? So this isn't going to go anywhere. And it seems like as the issue itself, immigration, increases, the right wing will only be more and more successful at using it as a scapegoat issue to turn people to their side and propagandize them, into becoming right wingers themselves. So, what do you think the correct message for the left is going into the Trump administration when it comes to immigration? Because I don't think that the sort of bleeding heart liberal humanitarian appeal is enough at this point. Unfortunately, I think we've tried that, and I think most people, even if they care, unfortunately, they care more about making America great again or the economy or whatever than the lives of people they don't know. I also think that some liberals run into an issue where they talk too much about the house building and the crop picking, right? And it almost kind of sounds like they're advocating for like a modern form of slavery or something. Like, we have to import desperate people from the third world to pick our crops and build our houses. Like, that doesn't really sound like a sustainable situation either, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
no, absolutely.
let's exploit a bunch of people that need help so that we don't have to pay American workers to, do this stuff that should be done by citizens. It's a weird thing to advocate for as well. So what do you think the right message the left should bring to this conversation in a humanitarian pro-immigrant way, but also one that makes people feel like we're still looking out for the best interests of this, country, the economy, and their ability to make a fair wage?
Well, I don't think the message is a bleeding heart one. I think we've completely, not we, but the Democrats have completely capitulated to a narrative frame in which immigrants are bad, period, end of story. And that's just not reality. It's not true. Our country's very fortunate that we're the kind of place that people want to migrate to. I mean, what you should really be afraid of is a time, which may be coming quite soon, when we are the type of place that people flee and don't want to live in. So I think number one, flipping that narrative and pointing out, like, we're actually very fortunate that we have so many people who want to come here and are a massive positive benefit, net benefit to our entire society,
Mhm.
and are what made America. I mean, you want to talk about what made America great? I would say that our history as a nation of immigrants is what has made America so unique and so great. But the other thing is, you're not going to fight a right wing populist scapegoating frame with this like neoliberal market logic, basically nothingness. They have a story about why you are struggling, what has gone wrong, what has gone sideways in this country that makes you feel like things aren't right. And they point effectively to two groups: immigrants and like quote unquote cultural elites, which effectively boils down to trans people, right? That's the reason for your problem. And if you don't have a competing narrative that happens to be the accurate one, that it's this coterie of billionaire oligarchs who have rigged the rules to their benefit, that they're the real problem. If you don't have a competing narrative, then yeah, you're going to lose that debate every single time. So I don't think the answer to, immigration is just to cuck yourself to the right wing worldview that, yeah, you're right, immigrants are bad and we got to lock the border and close it down, blah, blah, blah. That is no answer, and just results in mass cruelty and doesn't even benefit our society, let alone anyone else. You have to compete with a story that actually lands and makes sense to people. And, the truth of the matter is, the reason your wages aren't low isn't because of some, mom fleeing terrible situation in in Haiti or wherever. It's because these oligarch robber barons are making your boss is the one making your wages low, not that person. So that is a compelling narrative. I mean, that was the original, like the Bernie story of the world. And a lot of the people who are now Trump bros and, like love Elon, these broligarch types, many of them were Bernie bros. Like they understood that narrative. That narrative resonated with them, but you have to be willing to name and shame those villains and have a plan for dealing with it and a story of the world that makes sense to people. And that's where Democrats have just utterly and totally failed.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And one of the things that immediately drew me to your guys' show Rising back in the day, we were both big secular talk heads, but I started watching Rising because I loved your guys' panel. And particularly, I remember loving your guys' conversations with Chuck Rocha, one of the Bernie strategists, because he totally clobbered any of the notions that Bernie was not popular with people of color, right? He was extremely popular with Latinos. He was extremely popular mobilizing people in Nevada, in parts of Texas. He was so adept at getting Spanish literature out to people, like, hey, here's what I can do for you. Hey, you're the first person in your family that's allowed to vote in this country. Great. Here's how you can use it to help other people in your family. Here's what we're going to do to meaningfully impact you. Here's how we're going to uplift us all. And at the fundamental baseline of all that, it was a unifying working class message, which was, hey, the 1%ers, the people who keep offshoring our jobs, the same guys that did NAFTA, those guys ruined our economy in America. They ruined the economy of Mexico. And the same people who want to send you guys with no job opportunities here in America overseas to go fight wars. Yeah, those are the same people that caused all of the chaos in Central America, that sent a bunch of people, fleeing up through Mexico. You're so right that there has to be a story there.
Yeah.
I want to follow up by asking about Bernie's movement a little bit, because you did such an excellent job covering it over the years. I'm wondering if you imagine that he'll go down in history along the likes of a Jesse Jackson figure or a Eugene McCarthy figure, or a guy who fought the Democratic system so hard in the primaries, a guy who inspired countless disenfranchised voting groups, but ultimately was defeated by the machine and unable to get across the finish line? Or do you imagine that a leader emerges from the Donald Trump era this second time around, and with the support of Bernie Sanders as he reaches the final chapters of his life, is able to transcend and finally get into the White House? Like, do you have any hope for the Bernie movement continuing?
That's the fairy tale ending I want to believe in. And I think it's possible. I think there's an opening. I really think there's an opening, because there's a couple things that have happened that create a possibility that didn't exist before, which is, number one, I do think liberals are fed up with their own media institutions. I don't think MSNBC will ever have the power that it once did. Their ability to just basically name the winner of the 2020 primary and be like, Biden's the guy, sorry, just vote for him. Like that's done. That's dead. Even Washington Post obviously has lost tremendous credibility. New York Times has lost tremendous credibility. So the fact that you have, I don't want to say vanquished those media gatekeepers, but you have lessened their impact significantly. And also, we tried things their liberal way. Like, you guys got your way. You defeated Bernie. You beat him in 2016. You beat him in 2020. You ran Kamala. She ran exactly the campaign that you said was the one to beat Donald Trump, and you lost. So the fact that you even have people now, like, sometimes the Pod Save Bros and, the various others who are James Carville coming out and being like, that Bernie Sanders guy, maybe he had a few points right, tells you that there has been somewhat of a realization that you have to have a populist left answer to a right-wing fascist movement. And if we look to our own history, of course, we all know that that is the case with regard to FDR and the New Deal. So that increasingly, I believe, radicalized liberal base creates an opening. And one of the things that has really heartened me is to see your channel and Kyle's channel and David Dole, Mike Figueroa, and Majority Report, all of these channels that in this era are really blowing up, because there are so many liberal refugees who are like, I got to go somewhere else and, figure out a story of the world that makes sense again, with people who aren't full of shit, who aren't bullshitting me about like claiming they see Donald Trump as a fascist threat. But then the second he's in there, like, let me go have a little tea and a visit at Mar-a-Lago. Like, people who actually mean what they say. And so that gives me some semblance of hope. I wouldn't call it optimism. Well, I guess, yeah, hope, not optimism so much, because I think the most likely outcome is that the Democrats effectively cut themselves to Trumpism, like you already see them doing, decide that the best way for them to quote unquote win is to adopt his anti-immigrant worldview and do like kinder, gentler fascism. And, that's why they're passing the Lincoln Riley Act and all this stuff. I think that's the more likely direction, but there's a possibility. So, whether we all survive and whether it's not too late already is another open question in my mind, because I just feel like we have so many big existential crises that we are staring down like right now, not in the future, but literally right now. I think AI development is a major threat to society, if not humanity overall. I think that obviously the climate crisis, like it's no more, it's in the future and no, it's here. We need to talk about adaptation. We need to see what we can do to mitigate going forward. But these endless catastrophes, just one after another, tell you that we're already in, a late stage with regard to the climate crisis. The mass consolidation of wealth, it makes me question whether we even have a democracy at this point in time. I mean, Elon Musk basically bought the government, and they're all lined up to get more tax cuts and more government goodies and all the regulations rolled back and consolidate, the AI control and all have their crypto assets pumped up by the US taxpayer. So, the other part of me that really feels at my worst, a lot of despair in this moment, just feels like maybe 2016 and 2020 were kind of the last off ramp. Maybe it's too late. And obviously that's not going to keep me from fighting. And I hope that that's not true. And I don't know that to be true, but it's possible that it is. It's actually possible that it is.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir.